One of the things that I really enjoyed about so far what I've done in my career is that when you're working well with people, they give you really nice surprises. They do more than what you expect them to do, and they deliver things that you yourself probably didn't realize was possible. And so far, I haven't seen that from technology. So I think helping people to find or facilitate that extra something, that would be what we're trying to use the technology for just now.
Welcome back to the Thoughts on Selling podcast. Today it is my pleasure to have a good friend, Torquil Thomson, join me from Barcelona. Is that correct, Torquil? You're currently in Barcelona?
That's right. Yeah, I've been here for a few years now.
So the first question for the podcast is, who is Torquil Thomson? Give us a little bit of background on yourself.
Sure. Well, originally I'm from Scotland, but I moved to Spain about 20 years ago, around about the time I just started working in digital, mostly in SaaS over the last 20 years. And I guess I realized quite early on that I really love working with people, from digital marketing agencies to all the different companies that I've worked in. But I really love finding a way to build a system that helps those people to perform. I mean, I've gone through in the last 15 years or so being an individual contributor to working in sales ops and then working as a country manager. I always find that I'm trying to find a way to make things work better and help the team to enjoy being successful in every way that I could.
Yeah. And today you work for a company which has a very interesting name, the Conversion Architects. So you're a co-founder and you're a sales director there. So what caused you to start the business and what do you do?
To be fair, I didn't actually start the business. The business was Sarah, my partner in the business. He is a computer scientist by trade. He's even more systematic than I am. And he started the Conversion Architects originally as a cold outreach agency, principally using technologies like Clay to help companies to go to market. But we've been working together now for about 7 months or so. And during that time, we've kind of pivoted more towards helping companies to organize a system that's underneath the kind of outreach so that we can help them to be more effective. I mean, I can go into a little bit more detail if you'd like, or...
Well, so you and I are both members of Pavilion, which is an organization to help go-to-market specialists and others find a place to share best practices and war stories and commiserate. It sounds to me like Conversion Architects at some level helps with go-to-market strategies and tactics. What are you seeing in the marketplace that spawned this opportunity for you?
I think when we were doing the cold outreach, we realized that companies were kind of expecting kind of a magic wand, that they thought that they could use us to help them to build Clay, to help them to move into the artificial intelligence world. And I guess they thought that artificial intelligence, they thought it was like going to fix everything for them. But what we understood quite quickly is that it's really a learning model, and the learning model is based on the CRM or the data that the company is using for them to go to market. And if that data is chaotic, then you might get lucky, you might find an offer that resonates with the audience of the market and you end up accelerating their growth. But then when you go back and try and copy and paste, it more often than not didn't work. So what we tried to do is take everything out of their CRM or whatever they're working with, dedupe it, clean it up. And I mean, we found crazy figures like 40 to 50% of contacts in companies in CRMs is duplicated. And then we found 5 to 10% of contacts on top of that within the CRM had no name. So you're looking at like half of the data that people are trying to build their go-to-market strategy on top of. It just didn't make any sense. So we found a way to take the data out, to clean it up, to put it back in, to enrich it. We built a very simple structure along the winning by design bow tie, just to help people to start being more effective in the way that they're reaching out to their customers or their prospects.
Torquil, that figure of 40 to 50% of bad data is simply mind-blowing. I remember years and years ago when I was consulting at IDC with some of the big technology companies, HP made a statement that the data in their CRM system is considered a corporate asset. And anyone that doesn't treat the data as a corporate asset, if they falsify it, if they put in dummy data, if they sandbag, that's a fireable offense. And even then, HP probably had 85 to 90% good data, maybe. And you're saying that fully half? I mean, when I was running sales, my perspective was our CRM system is the engine of the business, or our Salesforce automation system is the engine of the business. And I'm putting, 93, 95 octane gasoline in that thing, right? If you're putting mud into it, you're not going to get great results, huh?
Yeah, I mean, most of the companies, to be fair, that we're working with are quite early stage and they've been in a hurry to get to market. And so they've added layers of AI on top of layers of AI, and it's helped them because they've quickly found some kind of traction. But I mean, we were speaking to quite a big company a week ago, and I'll give you an example. They have in their CRM 2 million companies, but they only have 1 million contacts. Do you imagine that's a massive problem for them that they don't know how to fix, to be perfectly honest? And it's not a straightforward solution because they have, I think this is something that we're seeing as well, I remember 5 years ago, your tech stack, kind of the base of it was your CRM. So you might build things on top of it. And at the end of the day, the source of truth was your CRM. Now, then you could plug everything in. So you could have like a sequencer, you could have a dialer, but everything plugged into the CRM, and you had all the data was based on the contacts and companies in the CRM. Now it's much more difficult to plug everything in so that everything is related back to one source. So you could have the same people in one system that are in another system, and the activities that are going on, they're not the APIs or the webhooks that you're using. They don't work in the same way as they did previously because everything's really new. A lot of the technologies haven't really been embedded in. And that situation for the company that had 2 million companies, only 1 million contacts, they had really big problems because they're using a CRM, an ERP, they have something for financing to do their invoicing, and they need, like, let's call it like a primary company for each of those different platforms. And so to decide which one is going to be the single, it's very complicated for them to figure that out. So, I mean, it's great fun, trying to solve that kind of problem, but it's happening across the board. The companies have really tried to accelerate the reduction in cost that comes with using AI, which is obviously very attractive. And obviously the speed that you can go to market as well can be accelerated. But there is a sort of loss of control, I would say, that we're definitely seeing across the board.
That's just crazy. And one of the questions that occurred to me, Torquil, was I can't remember how large the company was, but do they really need 2 million companies in their prospect database?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I know that they've gone through different strategies and they were targeting small and medium businesses to begin with. And probably, yeah, they would have not 2 million, but I would say, maybe upwards of 1 million companies that they could realistically target. It's something that would work very well for most companies. But yeah, 2 million is probably 1 million too many.
Yeah, yeah. Then the question becomes, if you start to think about go-to-market as a real set of processes, and by the way, I'm talking to the expert here, so maybe you should be telling me this, but if you start to think about it as a series of processes and you look at conversion rates, how many organizations do you need to put into the top of the funnel to get the closed won opportunities you need? It's not millions, it's hundreds or thousands. And just having 2 million prospects or 2 million targeted companies, it's unwieldy and it's super expensive. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, to be honest, that's more of an outlier for us. We don't normally work with companies with that scale. But I would say most of the companies we work with have between 50 and 100,000 companies in their CRM or in their TAM or whatever they want to call it. And, that would typically be the case as well, where half their data is rubbish as well. So, yeah.
Here's a funny story for you, Torquil. I don't know if we talked about this before. Years ago, I was selling a predictive analytics application. I had 4 key accounts. One of them was an organization. I shouldn't mention the name now because it could be embarrassing for them. So I won't. But it was a company built by engineers for engineers, sold to engineers. So I took my predictive analytics application in and met with the head of marketing operations, who was a friend, and he said, this is interesting. I'm going to put you in touch with the head of sales operations. And so we got together. There were like 5 of us in a meeting at some point, and they were all very interested in this platform because predictive analytics is pretty cool stuff for marketing automation. And then the head of sales operations said, we're really interested. As soon as we get our data to be perfect, we'll move ahead. And I looked at him and I said, great, we're done. The engineering perspective was data had to be perfect. Yeah, if you're building a bridge, I hope so. When you're marketing, it doesn't have to be perfect. And it shouldn't be at 50%.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that. Even when you talk about engineers now and we talk about the go-to-market engineer role that's very popular, we're finding different ways of looking at that as well because there's a very technical aspect to it. But if the technical aspect isn't being managed by somebody that has the business needs in mind, then you can end up building monsters or Frankensteins, or like making a machine that you spend more time building a machine to help you to sell than you do actually to sell your own product or to build your own product. And we're finding companies just now, actually, I mean, that made me think. I remember 10, 15 years ago when CRMs were becoming the sort of way that companies worked. And I came across quite a lot of companies that were deciding to build their own CRM, because at the end of the day, it's not that much different from an Excel where you just fill out the same fields all the time. But obviously the problem was that you needed to maintain it. It needed to be secure. You needed to have all the APIs set up with all the different platforms that you wanted to plug in for marketing, for what we were talking about, sequencers and these things. And that's a full-time job. For at least one person could end up being many people. And when that person leaves, then you end up in a really sticky situation. And I think the same thing's happening just now, where you have companies that, like we use Clay, I think that they're an orchestrator, that they can be used to do many different things. And they're constantly evolving. And you constantly have to learn the way that they're making the product work. And they're constantly developing new relationships with different companies that add value. And to build the actual orchestration to join your ERP to your CRM or to enrich from a different source, it's not going to be that difficult, but maintaining that is. And I think that that's something that we're also seeing just now in the market quite a lot, that they've invested a lot in their go-to-market engineers, so they don't think that they need to invest in a platform that they're then going to use, and they think they can just build it. And I think, in my opinion, that's going to lead to trouble in the future.
Right. Absolutely. There's this balance between understanding the tools and understanding the relevance of a specific tool in a larger set of processes. So from your perspective, Torquil, where along the pipeline do you find the most opportunity for improvement?
Wow. I think the full, from marketing to upsell or renew, I think that there's just so many things that can be done, that there are lots of jobs that automation can do that people don't want to do. But salespeople don't want to fill in the CRM. So you can automate most of that so that they don't spend time doing admin, and that they focus on developing relationships with their prospects or nurturing or opening up new opportunities. That's for sure. But I mean, once you've closed the sale and you want to do the handover, making sure that the CS team they have all the information that they need, a good handover. For sure, I think that there's gaps there, and there's ways to help the communication to stay steady between that critical point, and then even making sure that you stay in touch with the right people. Because if you have like in most companies, you don't sell to one person, but maybe the champion is the person that's going to stay there and be the person you're speaking to day to day or week to week. But the person that signs the contract, you don't necessarily have contact with them very often. You might do a QBR or something like that, and you may not even know that they've left the company, because if they leave, they might not put things in LinkedIn to say, I've left the company, until they've got a new job. They might take a sabbatical. A C-level role is normally the person that signs, and they might take a wee break. And using automation, you can identify when they're hiring for that role, or if they've hired somebody else. You can understand as well if they've been using a competitor of your solution, and that you need to connect with that person 6 months before the contract's up. So that there's like use cases all the way through, from zero to renew or upsell.
Yeah, I love the fact that I asked you a question that potentially was a technology question, and you 100% answered it with the people conversation. Because selling ultimately is, at least for now, is all about people engaging with people to talk about opportunity for improvement and for risk mitigation and for meeting milestones or key business objectives. I've got a podcast coming up with an organization that's built an inbound sales function that is 100% AI based. There's no humans involved. And like there's some efficiency built in there.
I mean, I think it depends what you're selling. I think as well, if it is the same thing that's happening over and over again, then, I can understand that working. Mostly, I would say we try to use the AI or the technology to help people to do a better job and to also be more fulfilled. If they could previously manage 25 opportunities, then we want to help them to manage 50 and to still have the same conversion rates. I think that those are realistic expectations and goals to set. And I think AI, the way that we're using it just now, this is what we're aiming to do. This is the impact that we want to have on companies. That we think people do what people do better than AI or learning models. And I think as well, one of the things that I really enjoyed about so far what I've done in my career is that when you're working well with people, they give you really nice surprises. They do more than what you expect them to do, and they deliver things that you yourself probably didn't realize was possible. And so far, I haven't seen that from technology. So I think helping people to find or facilitate that extra something, that would be what we're trying to use the technology for just now.
So I always enjoy hearing a couple of stories of what worked, maybe what a client tried without naming names that perhaps didn't work. That could be instructive for our listeners of, hey, we're using Clay to do this, or we're using scripts built in ChatGPT for this, and this is what we ran into. Care to share any recent learnings, either positive or instructional, as it were? And by instructional, I mean it crashed and burned.
Oh, I need to think about that.
That's okay. Let's move to a success conversation, a place where a customer is doing pretty well and your intervention made things better, right? You improved the conversion rates. They were having okay results. You came in and, here was the situation. Here's the action you took. Here was the differentiated result. Again, no names necessary.
We've been working with some companies that have a wide range of products, like in excess of 100,000 products. And they have, tens of thousands, like maybe less than 20,000 customers. And their products are highly sought after. And they work with like some of the biggest companies that would buy their products in Europe, but they also work with very small companies. And they had a lot of problems because they didn't want to use human resources to reach out to each of the smaller companies, the sort of long tail with a high propensity to convert. We were able to help them to identify them based on, if they matched the ICP, but also on their behavior. And then we were able to automate as soon as a product was released that was similar to that product, they would automatically get a notification saying, hey, look, this product's available. And the uptake was phenomenal. I mean, it worked very, very well. A very happy client there. So it's something that maybe companies would have had the resources to use a call center to do that previously, but now call centers too expensive. And so we found a sustainable and a cost-effective solution.
Yeah, paying attention to the basics has never gone out of style, although, as you said before, people were looking for the quick answer. Years ago, we called it the silver bullet or the magic bullet, right? What's the one thing we can do differently, or what's the one thing we can bring in or buy or adopt that will dramatically change our results, right? And the answer is nothing. It's hard work. It's attention to detail.
I mean, yesterday even I was speaking to somebody and they were asking me how they could improve their conversion rates with AI. I said, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to do that because unless you have human beings that we can learn from, then we're not able to find a way to improve necessarily on the conversion rate. We can do the same as you've done before, and we can help you to go into new segments using the same methodology as you've done before, but it's not realistic for you to expect you to improve using what we call AI just now to improve your conversion rates. We can help you to have higher volume, which will mean that you'll sell more. But that's just a common misconception that people think they can go from 10 to 20% conversion rate and they haven't found a human being that can do that yet. So how do they expect to build a model that will allow them to do that?
Yeah. So there's some behavioral analysis that you can do. My son is working at an early stage company that provides health services to athletes and other active folks. And he's been doing some analysis of product acceptance and outbound call scripts. And he was able to tweak some of the verbiage on the website and the various conversion tools. And through the use of that analysis of, what are the paths that work, what are the paths that don't work, he was able to double conversion rates and cut in half the in-cycle time. That's nothing different than we would have done 20 years ago, except that 20 years ago, you and I would have been listening to outbound calls and trying to map what a rep said with the conversion rate 2 weeks later out of Salesforce. Today, all those tools are available, as you well know, are available to capture the transcripts from calls, and we let ChatGPT or someone else, not someone else, it's not a someone, do the correlation of what are the paths that work, what's the language that works, what are the range of responses. So I did some analysis years ago looking at if I put an extra dollar into the top of the funnel, if I bought more leads, or if I spent an extra dollar improving conversion rates, the impact of improving conversion rates was like a factor of 5 to 1 or 10 to 1 relative to buying more opportunities at the top. Because if you increase the conversion at stage one, you don't have to buy more leads, right? You have more people going through the funnel, and it's incredibly more cost effective.
Yeah, so basically you need to analyze what human beings are doing and replicate the best practice. Yeah, no, that's very interesting.
We keep going back to that human being thing. Sales is interactions between human beings. It's nothing more, nothing less. And so many people are looking to automate it or outsource it or change it so that human beings are out of the equation. And if I'm buying a replacement server that's just a pure commodity, right? If I need another HPE or Power System 11 from IBM, do I really want to talk to someone? No, I want to send my specs. It's a 2U rack. It's got this much memory on it. It's got this CPU, and what's your price and what's your delivery? But if I'm setting up a new environment to improve customer loyalty that I've never done before, I want to talk to someone that has worked with 10 or 20 other organizations, and it's not what are they going to sell me, but what's the experience that their customers have had in the doing, not the buying, but in the doing, right? What are the lessons learned? So there's two pieces to it. One is the what do I need to know? And the second piece, which is even more important, help me feel confident that moving forward is good. Because if I don't have that feeling that moving forward is safer than not moving forward, I'm not moving forward. That's the essence of Matt Dixon and Ted McKenna's work in the Jolt effect, right? Don't give customers information. Help them make decisions.
Yeah. And so for when you're buying your server, do you feel comfortable with an automated voice? If you're doing like a telephone call, because you know it's just recording and it understands your mood and these things, but you feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's quicker, it's more efficient, and nobody really wants to be taking those calls anyhow, right?
But that's not where business looks for impact. If I'm just doing a commodity replacement, that's not going to improve my quarterly results by 30%, right? By increasing customer stickiness, that's going to increase my results, my financial results. Again, I want to talk to the team that's done that at 10 other organizations like mine. So now we're getting into a different topic. Sales is all about change management, right? What are we doing today? If we want different results, we need to do things differently. How do we get the organization to make those changes? What are the organizational change requirements? I hear way too few salespeople talking about that, in part because they don't stick around to see what happens in their accounts when change happens, so they don't have that talk track. I want to hear from the salesperson or the delivery team, what will my team have to do differently to be successful with this? And I don't think we pay enough attention to that in sales methodology yet. Too many salespeople are disconnected as soon as the customer says yes.
So how would you get them to stay engaged afterwards? Because that's when their commission is normally paid, right?
Right. So on the professional services side, many key account directors stick with organization. Sometimes they stick with a project and they see very clearly what happens in the project. In my experience at big companies and small companies selling software and SaaS, most salespeople, once the customer says yes and the contract is inked, salesperson goes off. At Oracle, it's like, I'll see you once every 3 years, right? You signed a 3-year ULA, I'll call you in 2 years and 6 months, right? And so then the salesperson has no direct understanding of, okay, so the customer now implemented the new CRM, the customer implemented the new middleware, the customer implemented a different version of the database or went to the online version of the database. And so they don't have the talk track of when you went from on-prem to in the cloud, here were the constraints we had, here were the data management issues we had, here were the accounting issues we ran into. Those elements are what the next customer needs to hear about. The salesperson, because they're coin operated, they don't stick around to hear what the CSM hears, right? And so they miss that talk track.
So maybe there's a space for AI to inform the account execs. But I guess the problem is just making them interested, because as soon as they are, as you say, they're coin operated, as soon as they cash in, then it's difficult for them to, because they have their priorities, they have their pressure as well, they have their objectives to make. So yeah, it's not straightforward. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Well, in Matt and Ted's follow-on book, which is The Activator Advantage, they specifically talk about the professional services salesperson who generally is involved either directly in the service delivery or is involved in the project. And again, the authenticity available. I've worked with customers like yours. It's not, I've sold stuff to customers like you. I've worked with customers like you. And here's what I saw in their implementations. And here's what you can expect. Here are the things, if you say yes to this project, here are the things that will need to change in your organization so that you can be successful. And again, for me as a customer, I need to hear that. I need to know, what does it take to be successful? For instance, if I set out to drive from Cape Cod to California, if I want to go to Menlo Park in California, I need to know how to put gas in the car. Something very simple, right? If I don't know how to put gas in the car, I'm not going to make it beyond Pennsylvania. That's a fail, right? And that's a simple thing. We count on the delivery people to do that, to cover that kind of stuff. But the salesperson should be in a position to say, if this is the journey you're setting out on, here are the things you need to know about going along the way, right? Every so often, you're going to have to stop and put gas in the car. By the way, you have to be able to pay for that gas. By the way, at 3 o'clock in the morning, not going to find that many gas stations open. Here's what to do. And that's a simplistic version of what someone implementing a new ERP system will run into, or a new customer management system, or a new patient adherence system, right? So, but it's all the same thing, right? I can see the corollaries between, a simple example, like a cross-continent trip, and a complex implementation.
I mean, previously we called them sales engineers for those roles, and they would be involved in the handover of the sale to customer success, and they would also be involved a little bit in the implementation, and they would be feeding that information back. If we had a big customer that we were selling to and it was going to be complicated in getting everything sorted, then we invite the sales engineer to participate in the meeting, and they're the ones that can share the use cases and the stories that customers, how they overcame these problems.
Torquil, have you ever been a sales engineer?
I never have, no. I didn't really exist when I think I would have liked to have been a sales engineer, but I think it appeals to me. I think it's a useful job and it joins different dots. I think I would have liked that.
I was a sales engineer early on in my career, and I'll never forget the experience of a customer or a partner. I was in an organization where we were partner driven. A partner executive would ask my sales rep a question and look at me to see if I was smiling or frowning. That was an indication of whether the salesperson was bullshitting or not. So, the two most important leverage points, from my perspective, the two most important leverage points in a sales organization are the sales engineer and the first line manager. If the first line manager is set up to do good coaching, in many cases they're not. But the sales engineer has a couple of things going for them. One, they have persistence across deals. We might change salespeople on accounts every year, but the sales engineers typically may be in the same account for multiple years. I worked with a guy who came from UPS and then was on the UPS account for many, many years. And he saw like 6 salespeople, but he knew the account intimately because he had worked there and then saw the relationships build and the projects move. And then the second thing is sales engineers can collect an incredible amount of information because at the day-to-day level, they're dealing with people that might not be that savvy about not telling them stuff, right? Working with their internal peers might say, yeah, we're looking at 3 other companies, or, this didn't really go so well, or this was an outstanding success. And all of that information can filter back to the sales team so that they can change their approach to the organization overall.
I mean, when you talk about companies, you're talking about huge international companies, whereas most of my experience has been working with very small companies and helping them to go from like 0 to X million. And I think the concept of having a sales engineer in those kind of roles and those kind of companies, the last company I was in, we went from, when I started, from 2 million to 30 million in ARR. And we did involve sales engineers, but once we got to a certain stage, I mean, we didn't have them to begin with. And it became, something that was really important for us was making sure that we had a very high renewal rate. Mm-hmm. And the sales engineers, I think, like you were saying, there wasn't so much bullshit. The sales engineer was there to tell you the actual implementation, what it would actually mean, how much time it would take, and to guide along the kind of results that you would expect as well. And that meant that we were selling realistic projects, which generally renewed for more time. But it seemed a little bit like luxury.
Yeah, I would suggest that it's never too early to have sales engineers on board for 2 reasons. One, in the absence of a formal sales engineer, it's the CEO or other founders who are playing the sales engineer role anyway. You're pulling, senior level executives in who maybe help build the application who should be out raising money or having executive level conversations with prospects or running the business, and they're doing the demos, right? So one, I think, if I had to mix salespeople and sales engineers, instead of 10 salespeople and 0 engineers, I might have 6 salespeople and 5 engineers, or 5 salespeople and 5 engineers, or something like that. So that the salespeople who naturally should be out having business conversations don't have to also be product experts. I ran sales on a fractional basis for a $2 million hardware company that was in the water quality management business. We had an engineer on staff who had been with the company 11 years. And every so often we pulled him into conversations with customers, with partners and customers. This was a 100% partner-driven organization. So I said, well, he's spending half his time talking to customers and he knows all of the customers because he's been with the company as long as anyone. Let's make him a sales engineer, right? It's a growth opportunity for him. It's a compensation bump for him. It's an opportunity to acknowledge everything he knows and help him to spend more time really having impact. And he jumped on it because it aligned with his interests. And it gave us a huge lift because we now had another voice in the customer conversation that was knowledgeable and respected. This was an organization of 3 salespeople. So this was a 3-to-1 ratio, where it had been a 3-to-0 ratio.
And it definitely makes sense. We previously used customer success in that kind of role to make sure that we weren't selling things that customer success thought that they could actually implement, which, it's not really their job. It's not a part of their KPIs. But at the same time, they didn't want to have a customer and had crazy expectations. So they had a slight benefit. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially with a more technical product, for sure.
Yeah. That many, many years ago, vendors had the upper hand. We knew more than the customer did. And then the internet came along and that kind of equalized things. Today, the customer can be dramatically better informed. And I'll give you a simple example. I sat down with ChatGPT and asked it to come up with a list of sales performance enhancement tools, specifically around AI-based training. And ChatGPT came up with a list of 10 companies that are in the AI-based training business. It gave strengths and weaknesses of each. I recognized most of them. There were a couple that were new to me at least. And then it said, would you like me to write an RFP for you? I could have gone out to market with like a first level pass of what do I need to know and respond to this. Now, I didn't ask it to actually write the RFP. I didn't need it. It would have been an interesting exercise. But customers, and particularly once you start going through multiple prompts, here's the number 1 prompt for ChatGPT. What else should we consider? What did you leave out? How should we improve this? Right? And that stepwise enhancement is really useful. Someone who's good with ChatGPT around a particular topic could get pretty smart in a pretty detailed basis around almost anything. And then you engage a salesperson who doesn't have nearly that same depth of knowledge. I think some of the technologies are pushing us a lot in directions we might not have foreseen.
I would agree, but I would say sometimes when I'm trying to fix something and I get an error and I keep getting an error and I don't know how to fix it, and I ask ChatGPT and it tells me to do something, and then I say, well, okay, I've done it, and I still get the same error. And then it'll say, oh, sorry, you're using a more advanced version of the platform than I thought you were. Which version are you using? And then you tell it all and it still can't figure it out. So I agree, but the practice is always a little bit more painful than ChatGPT.
Oh, so the PowerPoint description of how wonderful it's going to be is different than the actual usage. That's nothing new.
Yeah.
Torquil, this has been a fascinating conversation. I think what we can boil this down to is sales is still about people. No matter how much AI is getting hyped in the market, the tools available are tools that can assist or can help in more complex environments. They're not going to replace salespeople anytime soon. So I think that's one takeaway. A second takeaway, and I think this is the reason that the conversion architects are in business, is there's always room for improvement.
100% agree, yeah.
Torquil, where can people find you?
On LinkedIn, principally. I can share my profile, but...
First name spelled Torquil. Last name Thomson, Thomson.
That's it. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending some time.
No, thank you. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you.
Thanks, Torquil.
Thanks.
Another deep dive into the topic of sales excellence and the performance mindset. If you found this conversation interesting, I would appreciate it if you would share the podcast with a coworker or two. And to explore this topic in more depth, send me a note via the contact form on podcast.thoughtsonselling.com or find some time for us to talk at meet.acellergroup.com. Thanks.